everybody, it's Lon.TV, and it's time for your weekly wrap-up, and we got a lot done this week, starting with our big Google Cardboard giveaway that we did. A lot of fun. We did the drawing, and then we had like a 45-minute to an hour-long Q&A session where we just kind of talked to each other. Well, I would talk, and I would read your little comments coming through on the chat window. I want to do more of these live Q&As, and I want to also figure out a way to kind of bring in callers, so I'm not just reading and talking to you all, because I think it'd be kind of more fun to have a back and forth conversation. So if you're interested in ever calling in into something like that, let me know. It'd be kind of fun to know if there's enough interest to have some live callers calling in, provided everyone is appropriately behaving and dressed in the course of that. Now, related to that giveaway, there's still a number of you who have not yet claimed your prize. So Andrew, John, Frank, Cole, and Dawson, I sent you an email to let you know that you won. I just wanted to get your addresses confirmed before I sent these things out to you. So do look in your spam box in case that is where my email went. I think more than one person said my congratulations email ended up in their spam box. So do double check. I'm going to send another round of emails out just to be sure, but please check, and I want to get these out to you this week. So be on the lookout for that email if you won. So we did do a bunch of reviews. In addition to our live Q&A, we had the Microsoft Foldable Keyboard, which a lot of people were asking about, and I was happy to take a look at it. Pretty neat little device, actually. So we looked at that. It reminds me a lot of the Microsoft Surface type cover. Same kind of material and keys, and very, very thin, but with nice key travel. So a really nice little keyboard there. Keyboards are very popular on the channel, believe it or not. We also looked at the Anker PowerCore 20100. It is a compact but very high capacity battery for your phone and tablet, and what I liked about it was that both ports charge at the full USB 2 amp voltage, so it'll work with larger tablets in addition to phones. So that was a nice little device there. We also looked at the Panasonic A1 action camera. Not too bad of a camera with some night vision capabilities, but the battery life was pretty lousy on it. You can check out that full review. I've got everything linked above, by the way, so you can look at my playlist of every video that I'm mentioning here. We also took a look at the One, which is a piano keyboard that will teach you how to play it. It's got a nice little app to go along with it. It's an Indiegogo campaign that is currently in its last couple of days, so you can check out that. I actually played something on that video, not too well, but I did play something, so it is a cool little device. You can check that one out. And we took the DJI Phantom out for another spin, this time doing 1080p 60 video, so 60 frames per second at 1080p. It looks wonderful, nice and smooth motion, especially when you do kind of fast motion shots. I did like a little corkscrew going up with it. It was really cool to see that. So check out that video. I actually upconverted my studio portion to 60 frames per second so it could all be consistent, which was pretty cool. So I'm really having fun with this drone. It is an awesome, awesome product, and I'm really enjoying that. So let's talk about Windows 95, because today is the day that Windows 95 was released 20 years ago. I'm shooting this on August 24th, 2015. So 20 years ago is when the PC industry really changed dramatically, and the interface that we're all using now on Windows 10 kind of began with this one. It was, kind of diverted a little bit for Windows 8, but everyone has been so used to how Windows 95 worked that they kind of had to go back to an interface that everyone was familiar with, but it all started right here. And I wanted to just show you what we went from with Windows 3.1 to Windows 95, and I have both of those operating systems running on my PC right now, and I found an old article that I wrote 20 years ago reviewing Windows 95 for a college online newspaper that I wrote for. Now, before we get into Windows 95, we should look at what Windows looked like before. This is Windows 3.11. It was the last version of Windows 3 to come out before they made the big shift to 95. And as you can see, the interface is very different. You didn't have a task manager or a start menu or even a desktop for that matter. Everything kind of ran out of the program manager here. It also is running a lot faster on my Mac in emulation than it did back in the day that it ran on a 486 or a Pentium. So it isn't as snappy as you're seeing it right now, but you could get by with it. It wasn't as good as the Mac. It wasn't as fast as the Mac. If you ever used a Mac, you really liked the way it felt compared to this. But Macs were a lot more expensive than PCs when you looked at comparable hardware, and this was good enough for a lot of people, and this is what most people were running. The problem, though, was that if you minimized an application or something, it was hard to find it if you didn't really know what you were doing. So this program manager was kind of where everything was launched from. So, for example, we could load up some solitaire or something, but if you minimized it and you didn't know to resize windows or to click up here and go to your switch to interface, you had to, you really were kind of stuck, and your computer would slow down because you didn't have enough RAM to run all this stuff. I think I had maybe 8 megs or 4 megs of RAM at the time. so you could then maybe move Windows out of the way and find the stuff down in the corner. So again, it just wasn't the best way to navigate around, and this was kind of built off an older interface that had started back in the early 80s. So they were definitely due for a big shift, and that is what Windows 95 really was. So we'll log into Windows 95 here. This is the, I think this is pretty close to the version that ran when it was first released 20 years ago today. And as you can see, it's very much Mac-like in its appearance. And that might be insulting to people today, but back then the Mac people were the ones that were insulted because they felt like Microsoft had copied Apple's interface, and to some degree there was definitely some borrowing here. I mean, you have the desktop metaphor that the Mac had at the time. You could also click on the My Computer icon here and kind of navigate down into your folders and everything, and that was something you couldn't do on Windows 3.1. So the only way to really get at your files back then was to kind of load up this file manager thing the same way you'd load up any other application. You really were kind of detached from what was in your computer, and I was most excited about this interface when I was reading about Windows 95 back then, because I really liked the ability just to get at my folders anywhere I wanted to, leave shortcuts on the desktop, all the things I could do on the Mac I was going to be able to do on the PC. What I was not expecting was how awesome the start menu was, and it's so awesome that it's still with us 20 years later. In fact, when they took it out of Windows 8, everyone freaked out and they put it back in with Windows 10, and you all know how it works. I'm not going to go through all that, but this was the first appearance of it, and it was very easy to get at your applications and to know what was running at the time also, because I could very quickly navigate through here without even having to minimize programs or move them out of the way. I could go over to my Netscape Navigator browser. This was the version that was running at the time that Windows 95 came out. Of course, it doesn't work on much of anything these days, but I could very easily just kind of click around here at the bottom of the screen and switch my applications around, provided I can find my virtual machine again. There it is. And then what I did is I wrote an article reviewing it. This was a big deal back in 95 when this came out, because it was in all the newspapers. Everybody was talking about this. There was some major television news coverage of this thing. This was the biggest software release ever, even bigger than 10 and 8 from a marketing standpoint. Microsoft really pushed this hard because they wanted to get everybody over to this because it was so much better and really made PCs run as good as Macs did at the time, if not better. And I think that was the big jump. And it got even better as they moved into NT and other things. But if you go down my article here, I just wanted to point this out real quick before we move on. I advise people to be prepared to allocate plenty of space on your hard drive. Windows takes up a whopping 72 megabytes on my personal system. The smallest installation is around 40 megs. It is a good idea to upgrade to a larger hard drive, and they've dropped in price considerably. 1.2 gig drives can be purchased for as little as $300. 1.2 gigs. You can now buy probably 6 terabytes or more for $300. So you can see how fast things went. In fact, I've got a little micro SD card that is 32 times the space of that 1 gig drive at a cost of about $15 on Amazon right now, delivered to your door tomorrow. So we've come a long way over that period of time, but it's really neat just to see how much of the interface has kind of remained with us. And to some degree, I'm a big Mac person, but this whole taskbar down here was, I think, kind of inspired by what Microsoft put into their operating system, because they do work in very similar ways. So it's just kind of neat to see where everything is going. What was neat about Windows 95 in particular was that it ran the internet application so much better than 3.1 did, because right when 95 came out was when everyone was first starting to get on the web. So it was a very big jump, and the internet connectivity was so much more reliable that I was able to actually stay on for more than a half an hour without my computer locking up. So it's pretty cool stuff. I just felt like I should talk about it. Now, one of the things when Windows 95 came out 20 years ago is that I got online at midnight for it. Not so much because I was so eager to get my hands on the software, but because they had a special at CompUSA. If you showed up at midnight, they gave you like a lot of money off a stick of 8 megs of RAM. So I brought my computer up to 16 megabytes of RAM, which was a big deal back then. And Windows 95 ran great on my Pentium at that point. So 8 megs of RAM was very expensive, so I got a good deal, and that was worth staying up late for. All right, now it's time to go back to the future, to 2015, and take a look at what we'll be looking at this week on the channel. Sabrent sent over a new dock that they've come out with that allows you to use 2 display adapters through a USB port. So this is using that display link technology that we saw on some of those pluggable adapters. I'll link to it above. But they do say you can use both of these display ports simultaneously. It will come at an expensive processing power, so we'll see how it all works. Maybe we'll try it out with that little HP tablet and really see how hard we can strain it. It's got a bunch of other ports on here too, as you can see, so it might be a nice alternative to a Thunderbolt dock. These often are a lot less expensive than those are. We're also looking at a new printer from Epson that promises 2 years of ink in the box, which is a big improvement, although you're going to be paying more up front. So rather than buying a printer that's kind of subsidized by the consumables, now you're going to pay $500 for a printer that might have cost about $200 the year before, but they claim, again, that you'll be getting about 2 years of ink out of this thing. We'll see. I'm not going to be able to test the 2-year claim, but we will see how it all works. And they do say that the ink replacement is going to be a lot less because you do it with bottles that you just kind of pour into the tanks versus buying cartridges. So they're kind of upending the whole ink market here, which I think is long overdue because we've been dealing with those expensive cartridges for way too long. And this is a nice alternative, but you are going to be paying full price for the printer up front, which quite honestly, I don't think is a bad idea. So let's take a look and see how that printer works later this week. And I'm also going to be doing another one of my 101 explainer videos on memory cards and cameras this week. I actually shot it already. You'll probably get that one up tomorrow night or the night after. Because we're getting so much terminology now in these memory card packages. I just opened this one up, but it's 80 megabytes per second, 533X, UHS-3, Class 10, SDXC, all this stuff is showing up on these tiny little cards. They're running out of room to even print the brand names on them anymore. So I'm going to try to make sense out of what all of this stuff means and help people pick the right card for their camera, because if you have an older 1080p camera, you may not need to buy the latest and greatest memory card. You could probably get by with something a little less expensive and still be able to record high quality videos. We're going to talk about what all this stuff means, especially as it relates to write speed, because that's the most important thing on these cards, is making sure you match up the write speed to what your camera is writing. And if you want to help the channel, you can go to Lon.TV/Patreon and make a monthly contribution to the channel. You can also do so at my fan funding page at Lon.TV, which will be a one-time contribution. In both cases, those funds go to help buying the things that I review on the channel and then resell. So those Microsoft keyboards are a great example of that. I lose a bit of money on that transaction, and your contributions really help offset some of the losses there, because it isn't cheap to buy some of this stuff and often sell it at a loss. So those contributions do help a lot, but again, never required, because your viewership is the most important thing to keeping this channel on the air, or the cyber waves, or whatever they are. So I want to thank you all for watching and kind of sticking through my nostalgic look back at Windows 95. We do have a few more supporters that I will be thanking next week, just because this video has been running so long. I don't want them to get lost in the shuffle here. So we'll definitely thank all of our new contributors next week. If you want to connect with the channel, you can at Lon.TV/email to get on my email list. We've got the Facebook page at Lon.TV/Facebook, and of course my forums at Lon.TV/forums, where we can all kind of congregate together and chat with each other. So be on the lookout for that. That will do it for this week's weekly wrap-up. I'd love to hear from you, so please leave some comments below on things I should be looking for, especially as we're getting into the holiday and back to school session. So I'm really eager to see what are some of the inexpensive tablets and computers and laptops you might be seeing out there that I should be taking a look at. This is Lon Seib, and thanks for watching.